feel magically welcome to this dive in man. Here we are cracking the ice and leaving the masks behind. This is a journey to the essence through inner revolution stories. A space of surrendering, expression, of vulnerability and liberation, where we focus on soul expression, human transformation, conscious masculinity, and inner and outer travels that lead to constant rebirths. I'm Joana Patricio, the Blue Dreamer, and I'm your guide in this fusion between shadow and light. A space where the authentic voices of men are heard. Today I bring you someone with a mesmerizing mind. One that gets me so incredibly fascinated every time we have the chance to share our thoughts. He's a visual storyteller, an incredible filmmaker that has lived in several countries, co-founded 2 NGOs focused on personal development, and he's also one of the participants in my movie. His name is Cristian Ioan, and he's the first guest embarking with me on this podcast adventure. Hi, Cristian.
Hey, my dear. I'm actually very honored to be your first guest.
You know, I'm actually very excited about this also because I felt you should be the first person, and I don't know why I felt it, so I'm quite curious to find out.
I was actually going to ask you how that you chose me to be the first, but let's find out together.
So, Cristian, who are you?
I like to call myself visual storyteller. I like to tell stories, and I remember this passion towards visual arts because the visual part from the visual storyteller means that I do filmmaking mostly. 13 years ago, I started as a photographer, and it was my main language of talking to people. Now I still do films, and I like to express myself or to talk to people through this mainly. I'm a Romanian guy, just turned 29. I just moved from Berlin back to Romania due to some crazy stuff going on in my life. I've been also traveling quite a lot, mostly in Europe, and living in some places. I was living in Warsaw for 6 months, Moscow, in Austria, somewhere in a small village, in Berlin, and now I'm back to Bucharest.
How did these experiences made you understand about yourself?
You know, I usually when I talk to people about traveling, I tend to see traveling as a mandatory education that everybody has to be in, because usually education, or the education in the form we know, is not capable enough to teach us the life skills that we all need after we finish high school or university or PhD or whatever. We usually get a lot of technical information from university, but most of the time lack social skills. That's why I also, as you said, I created 2 NGOs I co-founded with my beautiful friends in Romania. That's why I dedicate my work to people, to stories, because we most of the time miss the essence of human friendship. You know, just talking, being around, being empathetic, and not necessarily learning how to do stuff, because we can all learn to do stuff relatively short period of time, but learning the basic skills requires long-term investment. That's how I see things.
You know, that's exactly what I've been understanding also through my own life experiences and through my own travels. There is this set of skills that are actually basic for us as human beings, and we are not really taught or shown that they exist, and therefore it generates a lot of pain and not knowing how to deal with situations, how to cope with feelings, and all these sort of things that we can easily observe around us and even within us. What would you say would be, like, from your perception, from the things that you already experienced, which skills would be important for us to know, like, since ever?
If I would get born again, if I would have the possibility to choose a certain skill, I think it would be actually a mix between more skills that creates you as an identity as a person. And I would definitely love to be more extroverted or extraverted, to be able to have, my critical thinking. I think The critical thinking is a skill that we learn, or I learned to traveling, and it helps me to make the right choices. And I think this is a skill that I would focus on from a very young age, especially now that we're living in the digital era where we are bombarded by lots of news, fake news, misleading facts, and all these things. I truly believe critical thinking is a thing that we have. And then I'm not sure if I can call it a skill, but is something we or people call passion towards something. If you're passionate about something, you'll eventually get better. And what is funny about this passion thing is that when we start our way towards something that we like, we see that thing, like filmmaking, for example, as a very straight line. But in every job, in every passion, in everything we do, there is a part that we don't like. That's totally normal. It has ups and downs, but I think the general view, if you like what you do, then that's good. So yeah, critical thinking and something I call passion.
How would you describe passion?
Passion is something you find after you tried other stuff, It's like trial and error. That's why I think if we start exposing ourselves from a young age to different perspectives, different people, different cultures, different things like filmmaking, go bike, run. If you expose yourself to these things, then you will eventually find what fits you the most. And then you will invest more time, and probably at a certain point you will be like I was, like, hey, I see myself earning money through passion.
Would this passion be related in any way to heartbeat?
I think every emotion is related to heartbeat, and passion implies not only one emotion, but rather more emotions. So following this logic, it's more intense heartbeat because there are more emotions in there. There are lots of heartbeats in there because you have lots of ups and downs and moments where you're not sure what do you want to do with this, if it's future proof, if it will lead you somewhere or not. There are also people around you telling you, probably your parents, that you should become a doctor or you should go and study economy or whatever. And then you deep down here, you're like, nah, but I just want to study art, or I just want to study filmmaking, or I just want to be around people. I don't want to be around numbers. So there are lots of heartbeats, definitely.
I just remembered, like, when we were back in Romania making the interview for the movie, you mentioned that one of the things that you really would like to experience was to experience all emotions or all sensations to the maximum extent.
Mm-hmm.
Was something like this. Do you still feel something like this?
It depends on the moment or the period of my life. I think back then I was really feeling that I numbed my senses, and I remember telling you this because I was quite out of control from my previous feelings and I was scared of them. Then I numbed myself. Let's say back then, yeah, I wanted to feel the emotions at the very maximum just to be able to realize what is my potential. And one of the feelings that I really felt skyrocketed was my fear of flying, which I never felt anything stronger than that. And I'm happy to announce you that now it's over, or I worked it out in a way that it's controllable. And from time to time, I actually feel that fear transformed in a pleasure, in something that I like. Because I sometimes get excited when I plan a trip by plane, flying. So, but from the point we met, I think 2 years ago, something like this, 1.5, 2 years ago, and the present, now I'm a little bit more balanced. I let myself go, but I feel peace in a way within what I feel. I used, as I told you, I went through some big changes, moving from Berlin to Bucharest. I broke up from my ex-girlfriend, and that was very hard for me to take. And it was quite recent. I had a very strange period after we decided to break up. So I was still living with her, and I was in a verge of committing suicide. I mean, I went on the balcony and stayed there for a couple of minutes, and I never thought I would be able to get to that state of mind that deep. But eventually I got back in and took a warm bath, which gave me, which regained my trust in myself and self-esteem. But I think everyone has its ups and downs, as I call them, periods where you feel you're not worth a penny, and moments where you feel that you're on the top of the world. I think they are normal. We just have to find the right balance between them and not beat ourselves to death. Because usually I identify myself as a person with low self-esteem, or I used to do that. So I was quite beating myself badly. But now I'm a little bit more, now after I cannot say I learned my lesson, but I'm still learning this lesson of appreciating myself more.
If life was a game, and like as a game, we have like challenges, which are these opportunities actually to find new skills and new strategies and to evolve and to pass level. If this that happened in your life would be one of those challenges, like in the sense like a big challenge that's kind of gave 360 degrees turn in your life, how did you manage to deal with all the emotions and all the things that arose from it, and starting again, rediscovering and redesigning what you are? Because in some sense, from my perception, when there is a relationship, it's like there is one person, there is other person, then there is the two persons, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's an association that is created. And then when this association finishes, you probably had to figure out again, like, who you are without this person. Who are you? Mm-hmm. Like, who is Chris and what's inside? What are the parts that is only Chris and not the couple, right? How has this process been?
Mm-hmm. So, as a short introduction, I've been in this relationship, the previous relationship, for 7 years. So it was quite a long time. And during all those years, you start to implement different behaviors from the other person, right? By the time you decide to break up the relationship and then move to another place, well, what I experienced was a moment where I, as you said, I questioned my identity. Who am I? And I had a moment when I was like super scared because I couldn't answer to this question. And for me, this is one of the most fundamental questions in order for you to keep moving. And it was very hard to answer to this question. So I thought I had a big problem by breaking up and moving on alone, or what I considered as being alone. So by the point I was desperate, I basically reached for help. So I posted on Facebook that, hey guys, I need help. And to my surprise, lots of I think 30 or 40 people answered to me in private messages. And I had 3 wonderful days of Skyping with people about my the lack of identity I felt back then. But if I would point towards 2 very important things. First, if you lose your identity, or if you want to replace your empty half that was your loved one with yourself, there are 2 versions that worked for me. First, reach for help to people that you know and talk to them. By simply talking, you just can get out the idea of loneliness, or this feeling of I'm alone, nobody wants me. First of all. Second of all, meditate. I find meditation is a very subjective topic, but the way I meditate, for me, it worked quite well in not necessarily finding the answer, but finding the right comfort to do the next step. So what I do when I meditate, and meditation also helped me to get over my fear of flying, is just sitting on the floor, imagining myself over and over again in that situation. And just by exposing yourself to that situation, you will eventually become more comfortable being there. And when you actually face it, it doesn't seem that big of a deal. It just seems like, it's just another thing that I should get over. And if you combine these 2, friends and meditation, I think this is a nice mix that can help you get over basically anything. A death of a person, a loss of a relationship, losing your identity, all these things.
It's like emotions are messages for us. Either if we label them as negative or positive emotions, they still bring us messages in a sense that, fears, right? When we understand not only like how to deal with them, but also why they appeared in the first place, what's behind the fear of someone dying, or the fear of breaking up, or the fear of flying, what's behind it? Because sometimes we don't know exactly, we cannot reach what actually makes us have that fear. Because it's something that sometimes we have in a subconscious level that is very present, but not at the conscious level. And I also have been understanding, like, whenever I face one of my fears, it's like, whoa, actually, to my surprise, now it's not a fear anymore. Why was I so afraid of this? Because it's like the mind makes us be really attached to this fear and to the things that may appear, and in fact it's like it was easier, and then it's, besides being easier than what we thought, then it actually makes us not be afraid anymore, because we already did it and we saw how we felt, not just what happened, but how we felt towards it.
You see, I see emotions more as a guideline to the general life that we live. If you feel bad constantly, then you might need to change something in your life. If you feel satisfied, then probably you're on the right track. Somewhere in between, and that's totally fine as well. I think those emotions as a guidelines will help you point out towards things that you want to improve. And as I told you earlier, if you have developed your critical thinking good enough, then you will be able to point out towards those problems, So critical thinking plus emotions as a guidelines, you will help you to see, okay, so now, I don't know, I feel depressed or unhappy with my life since the last 6 months. Maybe I should change something in my life.
Exactly. It's to look at the things around us, of the things we can perceive as something that can bring us something and that can guide us in a way.
There is another thing that you were mentioning, fear, which is one of the emotions that we usually don't know how to interpret, or it has many ways of escaping fear. Usually fear leads to numbing the senses, as it was in my case. I couldn't find a way to solve it, so I was like, okay, I'm just numbing my senses. What can go wrong? And then I realized that numbing my senses was not the answer to solving the problem, because the fear eventually came back to me in a much stronger position and hit me harder than before. So the only authentic way of going through an emotion is going through an emotion and not over an emotion. It's important to face it as it comes, to hit the wall, as I say, to hit the wall, and not necessarily to try to find a way to get over the wall, under the wall. Just hit the wall, and then if you're not going to die, you'll become better. When we talk about emotions, the cases where people commit suicide are very rare. I know we will be there at a certain point in our life. I think everybody has at least one thought of ending their life, but we are all still here. And as long as we are still here, then we are stronger than before.
Yeah, it's really like this thing of really hitting the wall. We need to hit it. Like, if we don't hit it, we'll never get over it.
Yeah.
Over anything. I mean, if the wall is put there, it's because we need to feel it. We need to face it and to really go through it, to allow ourselves to feel those emotions and to see what arises in our minds, in our bodies, like what is it bringing us, and then release it. That's the thing. Sometimes we don't really do it. We just attach to the thing, to the feelings that the wall gave us, when in fact we are supposed to really hit it, feel it, but then it's gone. The important is to keep also the lesson, because it's bringing us something, clarity into something, but then slowly let go.
You see, we speak here about us people who feel, who still have feelings. But unfortunately, what I see around me is that what society encourages is numbing our senses as being successful. And I know there are lots of people that they numb their senses and then they become leaders or they become hierarchically very, very in the top just because they are immune to different feelings. People who are very empathetic, it's very hard for them to not to digest what the constructive feedback from other people seems to be like. Even if they understand the concept of constructive feedback, it's very hard to numb your senses or to numb. I'm talking here about myself included and the people that we know in our circles, but we don't know the people from the very top positions in big companies. And I remember I read some papers and some kind of disease where you numb your senses, and for that people numbing their senses, you're not emotional when you go on a stage. You just don't care about what your employees feel. You just want to focus on the numbers. As long as your company makes money, this defines you as a character, your identity, your target. And there are actually plenty of people arranging their life in this manner. I think what is important for us to understand here is that we are all very different. By being different doesn't mean, I'm not judging that people. I'm actually happy that I feel what I feel because I feel it's taking me in a good place. But it's important to know that there are tons of shades of gray in between those feelings.
Indeed. And what would you say are the advantages of actually going to the process of facing the feelings and, in a way, heal what's behind them?
I think there is a very big inner advantage of you as a person who went through some hard times and also understanding what you feel. I think it improves your intuition. It improves your vision, your vision as a soul, I would say, not necessarily your eyes. And if you're working in the social area, it's definitely a skill that we have. And I don't want to sound too pessimistic here, but I think we desperately need this world to be shaped in a more empathetic way, or not only with the technology in mind and social distancing. And of course, now with the coronavirus and with this crisis, we all face the social distancing and it's not enjoyable, or it was enjoyable in the first or the second week of sitting in, but then we somehow all discovered that we need human touch and we need to stay along people and to talk to people. And by talking to a screen not necessarily gives you the same output or the same input if you take it, So I think the advantage is mostly very individual, but when it comes to groups of people, I think that this also develops your sense of living. It's like you also, by taking care of you take care of other people as well, because you're becoming proactive. It's like, oh, this guy over here needs help. I'm just going and offer him the help. It's very nice to have people around coming to you and asking, yo, Chris, how are you? How do you feel? Are you still okay? Are you still alive? We all need this. And unfortunately, we kind of numbed our senses through the use of social media, because we all like to portray the perfect life. We all like to show off how well we are and how good we live, and or not, unfortunately, but life doesn't seem to be that forgiving with some people. And I mean, this is an advantage if you are able to see this and not beat yourself because you see somebody with a perfect life, or everyone has the perfect life on Facebook, and you're like, shit, I have to go to work from 9 to 5. I'm not happy. It's better for you. Ease on yourself.
About numbing our emotions, it's interesting because even though me personally, I already got a bit of awareness in how to deal with my emotions. Of course, I'm still on the process of learning also how to do this. But even if I already have some clues in how to do it and I have been applying on them, these months I was doing it because I had loss. Not a loss. I just someone very close and important to my life passed away. And also in very odd circumstances, given that we are in quarantine and all the things that it includes and that are different from the normal settings that we would have in circumstances like this. And I noticed myself really numbing my emotions, like keep on doing the same things, keep on like overworking and doing all the 1,000 things I have to do. So then I put myself in this instead of feeling. Of course, then like 1-2 days after, it hated me. And yeah, like, and then it was confusing. It was very confusing because suddenly it was like, oh, what just happened? And then my mind was rejecting the idea of that this person had died. My mind was really rejecting it. And it was confusing because it's like, okay, I know it's a reality, I saw it, but my mind doesn't believe in it. And then I was trying to understand, okay, how can I deal with this? I mean, if my mind is confused, how should I deal with this? I was not sharing this with people because I was really like, yeah. But then someone asked me how I was, just out of nowhere. And I felt like sharing this with that person. And that person ended up saying a phrase that somehow connected the dots in my mind, the dots that were not making sense. Because what I saw, it was not that person. Yeah, it was the body, the structure that this person chose for this lifetime. And that's why the dots connected, because suddenly I understood that, yeah, the notion, that what I know this person is, it was not there. And I don't feel it has a loss, even though, yeah, maybe I'm not gonna see this person again, but it's like all this process of we trying to make sense out of things, that sometimes they change the settings and then it's like, oh, how can we make sense out of them? How can we deal with these new circumstances? How can we readapt? That's the adaptation is really a key on how to manage these things, right?
Yeah, you see here, the problem that I see for all the people is that we are trying to find very logical answers to the problems we have. And we can do this at a certain point. But when it comes to death or losing a relationship, then there is a process that we call grieving. And I think what is interesting to observe is that we usually cannot find the right answer. Why that person was like that? Why he died? Why, all these things. And usually I tend to compare the big losses, losing a relationship or whatever, it hit you very hard, as a wound that will only heal by time. So some things are just, they just happened. Our life will never be the same. And we have to learn to live with that. And most of the time we don't have an answer to that. And we'll probably never have it. Or we give different interpretations of what our beliefs are. It depends if you're spiritual, religious, not religious, all these things. We tend to attach those explanations to the death of certain people. But most of the time, not even this is enough. So time will definitely make the wound look like a scar. And from now on, from the point that we have the scar, I think it's up to us if we want to interpret that scar as a wound or as a tattoo. You see? There is a meaning that we give. And according to this, and she was asking me, Chris, you know that people usually see the empty part of the glass or the filled part of the glass? I was like, yeah, so what's with that? There is a third part of the glass? I was like, the third part of the glass? Where is the third part of glass? Have you ever thought of seeing the glass as being refillable? I was like, huh? No. And I was like, that's a very nice way of interpreting the problems, because usually the problems that we have, they are there with a reason. And most of the times we learn from the losses, we learn from the downs. And those are the most important lessons from our life. We are very authentic in learning from what we lose, not from what we gain. Because when we gain, we don't invest time in learning, but rather in feeling good, So again, That's called life.
It's mindset, it's mindset. It's the
Yeah.
perspective in which
Yes.
we observe the world, because it doesn't matter if it's death, if it's a relationship, whatever happens, even if I drop my glass, we can make a movie out of it, but we can also understand it from a perspective of what is it trying to show us? What should we understand from this? And when we shift our perspective, we can make it very tough for us, but we can also make it very easy for us. But not the easy of ignoring things and numbing the emotions and just not dealing with things, because, they stay within. They stay within our minds, our bodies. Those kind of things just stay with, and eventually they will want to go out.
And they will. And they definitely will.
We're going to have to deal with them in a much tougher way than we could have done. And that's what I see around. Like, everyone is kind of just ignoring things and suppressing all the things within. And then, it's challenging to observe how we do this to ourselves and to see it happen. And how can we have more awareness that these things are actually making us go from point A to point B and not stay around point A all our life, going around the same cycle, because it comes in cycles. It happens and then we just ignore it, or we proceed without thinking about it. We just proceed without really going deep, trying to understand what it is. And then something else appears. So a different situation, different environment, but the pattern is the same. And that keeps happening over and over until we finally look at it, face it, and break the pattern. And that's a process that usually we are not aware that is happening until we do.
I think everybody has a way to solve some problems. Some people are just immersing themselves into the problem. Some are just running away. But in both cases, we have to get through. That's the only way of moving from point A to point B in your trajectory, in your path, in your life path. And this is not negotiable. Life is not negotiable. Everything in your life is negotiable, but life is not. So I don't know. It's tricky. It's tricky because we are so different. That makes it very complex. If we had the possibility to put those bunches of feelings in some boxes and say this is box number A, number B, number C, and so on, it would have been much, much easier to give solutions to that. But it's not, because there are 7 billion solutions as people on Earth. So nobody can come to you and say, follow my rules and then you will be, You cannot, I cannot say this. There are people who does that, but...
Yeah, it's also about finding which are the methods, the ways, the techniques that work for each of us. Then we can share them okay, this worked for me. Maybe it will work for you. You can try it and give it a chance, and maybe it will work, maybe it will not work, but it's movement.
And here I'm going back to your question of why traveling is so important. This is the main reason, because it gives you enough ways to understand the world or to enlarge your vision about the world and not say, I'm the only one who has this problem, It's like, school of life, It's school of life, literally.
That's exactly what travel gave me, all these perspectives, all these people with different backgrounds, with different ways to perceive reality and to think and to act. And that's enriched us. And that's also what made me start learning about myself. When you travel, you just suddenly are exposed to so many different situations that you have to understand how to deal with them, what do you think about them, how do you manage, how do you cope with everything. And then you start understanding about yourself, and life is teaching you about yourself. Because in my sense, I thought I would learn about the world, and I did, in fact, learn about the world and other cultures, but I learned about myself mostly.
Now it's harder to do it with the quarantine and all this world's problem. But I'm pretty sure we will be able to travel again. Probably not the same as before, but I think moving around the world will still be an option soon, hopefully.
we are having an opportunity to stop, but to stop in a way that allows us and makes us go within. And for a lot of people, this is the first time that they're actually going within. And then, of course, there are challenges, but also it's the part of adaptability. We are adapting to the new settings outside of us and inside of us and inside our houses as well. So it's like we are having the chance to actually face the things, to face the feelings that we were talking right before, right? This is a chance for that. And I see it also as a period of a lot of rebirths, a lot of deaths, smaller and bigger, inside each of us, even if it's the death of a fear. A lot of inner revolutions for each of us, not only at a global scale, but also individually. Each of us is experiencing very different things and having to cope with them, and it's an opportunity for us to grow.
Yeah, well, I think we've been, as you said, forced to feel these feelings, and now with the quarantine, we can, of course, see it as a negative idea, but by being forced, we also can see what our limits are, or we can imagine scenarios that we were not able to imagine before, because being able to go out of your home was like a way of escaping your feelings. Now we are locked here and we have to deal with that. Well, how do you handle this, dear human being? That's amazing. I mean, this is also a good part. I know I don't want to praise that coronavirus is a good thing, but as bad it is, it also has some advantages. Why not make use of that as well by staying as careful as possible and as safe as possible?
If we think about life as a game once again, it's like a villain that just popped up and it's affecting the players, and the players need to react to them. Like there is someone behind a computer that maybe, I don't care, I will do something else. Or someone that's, I will find a way to go through this villain, I will find the resources within me. All these sort of things of perceiving this villain or this virus that's appeared in the game, right?
What's nice here is that it's a villain that we cannot see or accuse.
It's a mystery villain. And so we have to readapt our methods, right? Because we don't see it. So how can we deal with something we don't really see? How can we understand what are his moves, right? So we are kind of having to rediscover and redesign ourselves, right? And the way we do things.
And again, I'm going back to the critical thinking skill that we all have
Ta-da!
to have. Because, we can be very easily influenced because we don't see and we don't feel it. So everybody can come up with a theory about how the villain became a villain and how bad it is or how good it is, or, all these things. So by knowing how to choose the information might actually escape you from deep trouble later in life.
I just thought about something. Imagine that the mission of this villain was to uncover humans' essence. Then what would you say it is the human essence? How would you describe such thing?
This is a deep question.
I love deep questions.
The only things I can point out towards are the essence that it counts for me, Chris. So I couldn't say the human essence, but rather my essence, which might work for some people, might not work for some other people. For me, I think, you see, essence can be interpreted in lots of ways. So I can probably give you 10 answers to what's my essence inside me. I don't know. This is a very difficult question. What's my essence? Maybe you should answer what's my essence, because I'm biased. Maybe you should tell me, what do you see my essence is? I mean, the reason I'm asking you this, I'm not putting any kind of pressure. I don't expect an answer. But usually we are very subjective about ourselves, and it's very hard most of the times to define what the essence of every each of us is. And usually your friends or people who appreciate you, they can sometimes see clearer than you who your path is or how it seems to shape your future or your essence. I don't know. I literally think I'm a very empathetic guy. I'm a social animal and a man who was raised by women mostly. And I don't know if I would define it through some social skills. But yeah, I feel I'm trying to get around this question because I don't know what the answer is.
Now that you mentioned about that you were raised with women, could you talk a bit about your relationship between like this female energy? What is it for you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if I'm going back in my past, I had lots of female friends, and I really appreciated the way they could express feelings which were deeper or more authentic than the bunch of guys I had in my life. Of course, I met super amazing men in my life, and I have plenty of male friends. But what really attracted me when it comes to female relationships, and I'm not talking here about any kind of intimate relationships, I'm only talking about relationships, like, and that's it, was that I could talk very open about what I feel, and without receiving any kind of, I was prepared to say judgment, but I was feeling more free to express what I feel. And the male friends that went through my life, I rather had this more technical kind of discussions or activities, more technical activities, more, playing something, talking about some objectifying objects, stuff like this, which I admit might also be a stereotype that I slowly developed, is the inverse stereotype that is presented in our world, as it's given to us from commercials or ads. But I feel very comfortable being around women because I can go very deep in the topics of life, of who we are, of why we are like that. So I find it more authentic than talking to some men. But again, now I would say it's more balanced than before. So I have male friends, which empowers me as a man and gives me the need of talking about deep topics and seeing the perspective of a male.
And how does it make you feel now that you have also this perspective of males and that you can actually talk deeper with males, like with your male friends?
Now I don't see in terms of male and female, but rather in terms of people whom I can talk to and people who are, or I don't synchronize enough to them so I can open fully to them and they also don't open fully to me, which is, I find it normal. So I just see it as, if we can talk open to a different topic or a certain topic, let's just talk about it. It doesn't matter how, if we feel we're on the same frequency, that's okay. If not, that's also fine. We don't have to be the same in terms of thinking.
Because above all, we are all humans.
Yeah.
And in which ways has it contributed for you to, throughout your life, being able to talk and think deeper and also to express your feelings and to show them? In which ways has it contributed for the person you are today?
I think understanding the deeper feelings, it's more of a mindset, as the power or the way that other people numb their feelings. It's just different kind of approaching the world. I think it helped me because I could connect to more people and I can develop more meaningful relationships. For example, with my mother, my friends, with my girlfriend, with my father, On the other thing, I also feel there is a big disadvantage because from time to time, it also consumes me, putting lots of effort into these talks. And sometimes I get very into the topic and it's a source of draining energy as well. So that's why balancing things out. So I don't think being too empathetic is the key to be a better person, nor being too empty of feelings. I think we have to learn how to balance these things out, not necessarily to take and get and numb, but rather to know when it's time to relax and empty your head, when it's time to talk, when it's time to invest time in yourself, when it's time to invest time in others, when it's time to give back to the world and keep things for yourself. Always, but always, I think it's a matter of balancing things out. Let's say we all love pizza. It's a statement which is not true, but it's generally accepted. If we have too much pizza and we eat too much pizza, then it becomes obsolete and it becomes frustrating because we will get eventually full of pizza and we will not like pizza anymore. It's the same with when we talk about emotions and feelings. When we have too much of something, too much of a pizza, too much of a beer, too much of depression or happy, we kind of embed that in our feeling and it's not enjoyable anymore. That's why trying different things, balancing feelings, finding ways of learning and being yourself, it's very important. You have to have an hour of time for yourself, 4 hours of working, 2 hours of talking to whatever, just balancing things out. It's much more enjoyable than having one part of something. So again, going back to your question, I think numbing or feeling too much, they are extremes usually. They are not the answers to. And some people, they have this balance is unbalanced. As for me, for example, I tend to attach to some ideas or some feelings, maybe too much. I'm still learning how to digest them or how not to take them upon me. Sometimes we also take other people's feelings, which, you see, this thing becomes so complex because we are not responsible for what other people are feeling. Sometimes we cannot explain how we feel and why we feel like that. So we always try to find those answers. But balancing things out is, I think, the perfect way of, keeping yourself on that safe level of being sane.
In practical ways, how can we achieve this balance? And how can we even understand what is actually this balance? Where is it? What is the point in which we achieve balance?
I think the point is your own judgment, because some people might like more to be on the beach or whatever. Some people will feel guilty if they didn't work enough today. Some people will feel frustrated that they don't have enough relationships of people who they can talk to. And I think it's a mindset that you create by trying things, by not being, by not rejecting concepts, ideas that might not seem part of you just because they're not part of you. For example, I can give you the example of yoga. Yoga for me was a thing that I would have never done 5 years ago. I would have been like, what the heck is yoga? I just want to go to the gym and build muscle. And then some friend told me, like, you should give it a try a month. It's not a big deal. Just give it a try a month. See if that works for you. And then you just can throw it away. Throw it in the bin if you don't like it. The reason behind I tried yoga was that I had a very big back pain. So I was some kind of forced to try yoga. So I tried yoga in the first month. Then I subscribed to the second month, third month. And I ended up practicing yoga every day for, 7 months. And then I healed my back problem. And then I was like, wow, what an interesting thing. And again, I went back to my younger self, trying to see how I saw the world back then. And I was like, why I was rejecting all these things. Maybe I should give them a try as long as they don't harm me and see if I like them or not. I always have the choice to throw them in the trash bin or to take them upon my life and to redefine who I am. And for example, now I don't practice yoga very often, but it's rather a combination between yoga, running, and doing some gym training. And I think this works best for me, but I would have been incomplete without yoga. So, there is the small pieces of the puzzle that you see somewhere there and you're like, this is too big, this is too small, this is smelly, this is too red, this is too blue. As long as you're away from that piece of puzzle, you cannot see it clearer. Bring that piece of puzzle in the front of your eyes, feel it, sense it, smell it, put it there in your puzzle, life puzzle, See if it fits. If it fits, that's very well. If not, just put it away and take another piece of the puzzle. It's easy in theory, but I know that if we don't develop this if we're not used to think this way, it's very hard to be open to this kind of mentality. So just give it a try. That's the only thing I tell to people. What you don't like. I don't like eating spinach. Just give it a try. Put it in your mouth. You don't have to swallow it. If you don't like it, just leave it away. Throw it.
This is why I like so much hearing you and hearing your thoughts and the way you perceive things. I mean, and I totally relate with this because something I learned this year is that sometimes, or at least for me, sometimes the things I reject the most are the ones that are exactly what I need. And I only find out that after trying it, but after rejecting it for 1,000 times and having the weirdest sensations. And then, and it's even interesting that you mentioned yoga because I tried it again some time ago, and because it was something that never called me. Not my thing. And I tried it like twice or 3 times like during my life, and there was one time that I kind of like it because the girl that was guiding us, it resonated with me, but her voice guiding it. And I tried it like, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks ago, and I was like, whoa, this is exactly the thing that in this moment of my life I'm needing. And oh my God, I was rejecting it all this time, but and this happened also with tarot, with aura readings, with all these sort of things that now I see the huge potential there is in them for my life and how they are such amazing tools also for personal development to cope with life. And I was rejecting them because in my mind they were things that no, not gonna happen. What is this? I was really rejecting this idea because I got used to think certain things about them. The things that I reject the most, they seem so far to be the ones that are exactly what I need.
That's very, very well said. Look, there is a very recent thing that I did. Probably for the guys that are listening this podcast, they cannot see me. But now I'm bald. And this was a thing that I was really afraid of doing. And I did it less than a week ago. And I thought I found the perfect, or I still think, I found the perfect moment of being in quarantine. I was afraid of social judgment and stuff like this. And I was actually afraid of not being myself, or that I would be like, oh, what is this ugly face? And I actually feel very good now because I feel that I somehow gave a reset to my own self. And after all these hard times of moving from Berlin to Romania, breaking up and stuff like this, I really needed this. But I was super terrified. I was like, oh my God, I cannot do this. This would be terrible. This will turn out very bad. And I was like, okay, screw it. I'm just going to make it. So I just did it, and it's part of life. It doesn't impact me that bad. So we're just trying things, see how you look, see how maybe I will like it. I mean, just give it a try, If it's not that bad, then it's not gonna be that bad.
I was actually surprised when I saw you because I was not expecting it. But now I'm like, wow, because I know the story behind it. And that's the thing. I love knowing the story behind the things. By you telling the reason why you shaved your hair, it made me understand about the fears of judgment that you had and this sort of things. And that now that you had the chance, you gave it a try, right? So it follows a line with the things that I wanted to ask you now. And I think it totally relates because who are you, Cristian, without pressure?
I'm just a passionate guy who likes to do what he likes to do without any constraints. But I think doing the things my own way taught me how to be who I am nowadays. I don't know. I mean, I have lots of definitions about who I am. I wrote down a definition exactly when I left Berlin when I had this identity crisis, and I'm gonna take the journal and I'm gonna read it to you.
I'm looking forward to hear it. I even feel privileged that you are gonna tell it, that you are gonna read it, and that I'm gonna be listening to it, and all the people that are listening to us as well.
So look, this is more, of course, more professionally oriented, but it's also a very big part of who I am. I wrote here, from now on, this is who I am. I said, I help individuals to achieve their potential and clarity by approaching creative solutions that inspire action and drive change. And what I said in here is not what I want to give away, or not only what I want to give back to people, but it's also what I needed the most. So I needed to get help from people to achieve my potential and clarity. And I always needed creative ways of going through things and over things. And I always like to think that a pen can be more than a pen. A life can be more than a life. A person, it's always more than a person. It's someone who's important. So the importance of things. And I think this is it. This is who I am. It's a guy who's looking for his creative approach on life, on his professional path.
And something that I also learned is that we work exactly with the things we need the most. We work with the things that we struggle the most, because those are the ones that we had to understand how to cope with and to find the methods to work through, right? And so that makes total sense. And also this podcast is only existing because I had problems with expression. My voice was not heard. And now I'm putting my voice out and I'm allowing others to make their voices also be heard. And it's these things, when we find these keys, things move. And you found the key. Would you think this key that you found, could it be related to your essence?
I think there is not only one key. There are more keys that open certain doors or certain treasures that might show you who you are. But in regards to what you said and essence, I think the hard parts of our life, usually what we don't have or a certain fear, is or hides the key towards a certain answer that makes us better. And not necessarily the fear is the one that creates the essence, but rather the discovery, the treasure that we find after we unveil the key is what creates that essence. But it's a process. It's not like I found the essence, but the essence is always in development as long as we are alive. And this is the tricky part here, because when it comes to define the essence, it's very hard to define it, because this essence will be definitely changed, and it's growing and growing and growing as long as we get younger and younger and younger, if I can say it like that. Younger as a soul, of course.
It's really like this process of diving into ourselves and then unlocking all these doors with all these keys that show us little bits that then create a fusion. And this fusion, we start having glimpses of what is the essence. But we only see these small glimpses, and it's amazing, this process.
You see, just a very important thing for me, which we tend to ignore. For me, one part of being yourself, it's also bring some humor into the play, because usually we're narrowing our professional path, life path, blah, blah, blah. And we feel, humor just is such a nice spice. It's like an Indian spice that you put in the food and you're like, I don't know why this food is so amazing, but it just feels good, man. I have to put myself into everything. And just by putting this humor, which sometimes can be just, making funny faces. Sometimes can be just by putting a crazy sound and singing in the shower or whatever. It's part of life, and we don't have looking stupid should be part of who we are. It just makes things funnier.
Because in fact, it is part of us, but we block it. We block it, and because we are afraid of this judgment, because it's weird and we are not supposed to be weird. But what is weird and what is normal, and all these sort of
Nothing
things.
is weird.
When we are authentically ourselves, like we just let words flow and we let our behaviors flow and we just are silly, and yeah, it's part of us to be silly, and it's okay. It's make us feel joy as well.
Yeah.
So Cristian, to end, what is your voice saying?
Keep moving on the path that you already chose. I've been doing this exercise. If I would have had all the money in the world, would I still do the same thing? And the answer is, yeah, sure, of course. I mean, I'm doing this anyways, even now when I don't have enough money. I would do exactly the same thing. I would tell stories through film.
And do you consider this to be a way to understand that you are on the right path, the part that works for you?
I don't know if this is the right path or not. I'm trying to see as further as possible by trying to become better, by trying to read about other topics, by trying to see if this profession is the right profession. I might change the profession. So I'm not sure if I'm on the right track. It seems to be right. I am trying to constantly improve and see if this will bring me joy or not. But so far, it gives me enough joy to keep going.
I remembered about this part of understanding how to play with the micro and macro perspective.
Being in the micro aka the inner world, and seeing the details, and when we talk about problems and things we do and stuff like this, it gives you the possibility to fine tune, to change small things that in a larger scale might have an impact or not. But okay, I'm gonna give you a very practical example. When it comes to film, for example, if we don't put the details in there, the film doesn't look that polished. But if you put the details, everything looks very cohesive. And going back to the micro and macro perspective, I think we all start by thinking macro idea, what I want to do with my life. Then we start narrowing things down. And at a certain point, we come to the very practical things. In order to become who I want to become, I have to wash the clothes. I don't know. I have to start shooting, or I have to, there are very, very practical stuff. And then at the end of the day, or the week, or the year, or the decade, you might say, looking back to the past, I'm like, yeah, I washed clothes, I counted the bills, but all in all, I feel happy with what I did. And here we are. I have here 3 feature films or whatever. Here are the results. I'm happy with what I got. So it's always a switch in between micro and macro perspective, but it's always important to keep both also on the micro track, but following the macro perspective, the great plans that you have.
Cristian, how can people know about your work and your thoughts?
You can see what I did or part of my projects at framingreality.com. This is one of my websites. I'm currently working at 2 side projects. The first one is a YouTube channel, which main focus is yoga and meditation, which is called I Speak Yoga. And we want to develop a nice platform for people and to give back to the world movement and, guided meditations in order to you guys to be able to find the answers that you're all searching for. And I also have another YouTube channel, which is called Framing Reality, where I usually post stories about my life and what I usually do. I explain how I see the world, and that's my personal and very, very not private anymore perspective about life.
I would like to really thank you for sharing your inner worlds and all those deep things that are going on, and for really embarking with me in this journey, like the first time I'm doing this.
It's very well. I think you did a great job, really. Thank you so much for having me, and I hope this project leads you to the right answers to your questions.
Let's hope so. Not only my questions, but everyone's questions, because in the end, I guess we all kind of share the same questions, but we don't share them, that we have them. And the more we share them, the more we can actually start getting some glimpses of the answers. And then we can try them, put them in practice, and see what works for us. Ta-da!
You know what's funny in the podcast? I'm not sure if you listen to many podcasts, but I've been through a lot of podcasts, and it was very nice because I saw a pattern during the end. People are like, yeah, okay, thank you, and they start talking again about different subjects, which are, it's like, yeah, oh, and I forgot to tell you about this and that, and it's nice to see that we have this pattern as well, because it's very enjoyable. As long as, the host was so kind, the podcast didn't end at saying goodbye, but rather at finishing with other topics.
Because honestly, this won't stop. I would just keep talking, but it should have some time limits, and I'm working on myself to put some limits in time, so I'm trying.
Yeah, I'm really glad that we did this, because it was also, I think, it was first time for me as well to be in a podcast.
Ooh.
So
congratulations.
It was interesting. Congratulations, we survived the podcast test. Now we can move on and create a podcast for hundreds of episodes for people to listen. Yeah, my dear.
Let's see what flows with the river.
Please stay safe during this quarantine, and till the next time, I hope we will all stay safe, and let's do what we like to do the most. So let's focus on ourselves now, because we also have this opportunity.
Just get in contact with your inner child. What are the things that you really, really like to do? Those things that you don't do since a kid, and now you have the time to do them. What are these things that you can do at home? Just go and do them. Why not?